This episode of Force Fed Cafe is brought to you by our friends at High on Life Superfoods. High on Life is the leading provider of hemp-based nutrient-rich supplements intended to instill optimal health to those who wish to perform at the next level in the physical and creative realms. Lit is an amazing hemp-based raw food blend that helps reset your body's nutrients balance and kickstarts your metabolism to get you going through the day. High on Life is used by some of your favorite bands: Suffocation, Trivium, Dark Angel, Testament, Body Count, Massacre, and many more. Go to highonlifesuperfoods.com and enter the code ForceFed10 on checkout to receive 10% off your first order.
Hard Reuben. Oh my God.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kevin, a.k.a. Hard Reuben, coming at you with episode 23. This is awesome. So, today, we will be having a conversation with my guest, Dave Reed, from the band Moths and Locusts. Dave and I actually go back quite a lot of years, as do many of my guests that you've heard so far. And Dave is literally the poster child, I think, for a working class musician. This is a guy that has a love for music that has spanned our entire friendship and even beyond. He's been part of several burgeoning music scenes, including the early days of thrash metal in Toronto. He was a big part of what came to be known as the funk metal scene. He has been in the record industry making records for people, other artists and musicians, and himself now for about 20 years. And I'm pretty pleased to have him here with me. Wherever this guy goes and whatever he does, he has his fingers in the music pie. This is a guy that just loves music. All kinds. I had a chance to sit down with him a little bit late last year while we were going to see a Canadian rock band, which is one of the few that I really have a taste for, called Sloan. And it was a great show. It ended with him jumping up on stage and playing bass for one of their hits, which was really awesome to see. I'm hoping that you get a sense for this guy. He's a really deeply caring and kind and awesome individual. He's a fantastic musician. His bands are wonderful to listen to. And the sound would be a little bit of a challenge here because we were in a bar, a live venue, waiting for the show to start. So there's quite a bit of background noise. But all in all, I still think it was a pretty great conversation. Check it out. Let's start with having you introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Dave Reed. I'm, I guess, renowned for a whole bunch of things, playing a lot of bands. Lived in Toronto, lived in New York, lived in Nanaimo. Currently playing music in Moths and Locusts and working all kinds of other music angles out here on Vancouver Island.
So,
for little or no money.
For little or no money. So many people.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me. So this is another one people who listen to this podcast will be familiar with my Blast from the Past episodes, where I reach out to folks that I knew when I was a wee buck wearing pajama bottoms and combat boots. And that's sort of where you and I crossed paths. At the time that you and I met, you were in Sing Along with Tonto.
Yes.
With Terry, who's also been a guest on this podcast.
That band ran for 3 or 4 years, I guess. And we had a pretty good run of it. You know, we were pre-indie when you think about it. It was kind of post-metal, pre-indie for me. There wasn't a lot of... There was some cool stuff happening but in Toronto, but not as much as ended up happening. Like, it just totally blew up. We played a lot of great gigs in Southern Ontario, across Canada, down to New York and stuff like that. When I describe the band to people now, I'm like, it was like a party band, you know? But, yeah, it was good times for sure.
So we talked a little bit, Terry and I talked a little bit about how you guys got totally crushed by that Red Hot Chili Peppers craze that happened in the late 80s, and you got really mixed into the blender with that.
Yeah, there was a lot. It wasn't just them. There was a lot of bands doing that sort of cross genre pollination thing. It was trendy to a degree, I guess, but it all happened pretty naturally, I think. And it wasn't just bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers they were dynamite live back in the 80s. They were absolutely dynamite. And to see, they were part of that whole wave of bands coming from the underground into the mainstream. Now it's, I wouldn't recognize their songs, but just in a totally different thing. But, there was other bands like Fishbone who we were just talking about. Like, we loved that stuff too.
Yeah.
And we loved, 24/7 Spies and bands like that. And, Bad Brains. Loved all those kind of bands. Beefeater, that was Terry's favorite band. And just brought some, like, metal stuff and whatever. I remember an early reviewer making note of like the wah-wah pedal I was using and being like, it's like Kirk Hammett, or I was like, oh sweet, somebody got it, Yeah, early days in indie music.
In Toronto.
In Canada.
Yeah.
Pre the boom.
Let's step back a little bit, because people have heard a lot about Sing Along with Tonto in a previous episode, but I want to talk to you a little bit about some photographs we just saw 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
Like early mid-'80s Toronto, when I remember coveting, the T-shirt that used to kick around that said Toronto, heavy metal capital of the world, right?
Man, nice.
And you were in that. You were front and center for a lot of that. So
I was fortunate enough. I now realize to have grown up in such a cultural hotspot, urban center. I grew up in the suburbs, but from an early age, I think I was 10 maybe when I went downtown Toronto for the first time solo. Went to the museum, and by 12 I was going downtown every school day. So I went to school down there, so I was pretty savvy on the street and stuff, and always going to record stores. So this is all late 70s stuff. And, I would just kind of after school or even like cut last class or something, jet out from St. George's College and hit the record stores and the music stores. Yonge Street was full of great record stores. And you just go and browse and see the latest stuff. And I was always interested in the heavy music. And, I must have gotten into metal. I think it was 80. I saw something on TV. I remember seeing a thing on the new wave of British heavy metal on the New Music. You remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
So good and so informative. And, like, they would cover, everything they would cover would be so different and so cool. You watch the whole show. It's like, oh, man, like, Tom Jones is amazing. He's got a super deep career. That thing we saw after Iron Maiden was super cool. So I got introduced to Maiden and those kind of bands. I was like, this is wicked. A neighbor kid introduced me to Black Sabbath, bought their record, like, hadn't heard a note, but he was like, you got to hear this, dude.
Which one?
We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. The hit. It was the greatest hits. It was like $1 more than any of the single albums, and it was a double album, and It was awesome. And it is an awesome starter record for like a 10-year-old for Black Sabbath. And I got into like Van Halen and Rush, of course, and all the heavier stuff started coming out, and then they started coming through town. And so, I saw Van Halen in 80. I saw Rush in 80. 81 I saw Rush. Triumph, all the heavy shows. And then eventually bands like Priest, Scorpions, all kinds of early 80s stuff. And that just kind of, the interest in music and the record store access that I had. And I had good friends, too, going to high school. And guys from Willowdale who were big record guys and stuff and into records and collecting records and heavy metal. Harris Rosen and I, really good friends since high school. And we both introduced each other to all kinds of new shit. And like going to stores like the Record Peddler and Records on Wheels and Driftwood and Vortex and stuff. You had access to all this great stuff. So the Record Peddler particularly, every week there was new records coming in. They were like the best distributor of underground music in Canada, one of them. Mm-hmm. And so they would get all these new records as they came out. Venom records. What the? This is the fucking scariest shit.
What is this shit?
This is too, no. Like, I can't let my mom see these records. Like, this is the real deal. Like, there's some backwards stuff on there. It's like, no way, man. Like, turn it up if your mom's coming, turn it down. Like, you're going to get it taken away. And then eventually, like, Metallica and stuff, of course. That was, like, the one that blew the powder keg off. Kill 'Em All. They were playing it. The week it came out, of course, it's a brand new killer record. And everybody, I just was like, done, sold, taken, bought it. and just kept buying all of the records and seeing all the shows. So, yeah, by 84, I was only 17, but I figured out you can just walk in, get there early enough, walk in and linger around and don't order anything stronger than a soda pop at the bar. And yeah, it was great. So I got to see all kinds of great shows. 84, Merciful Fate, Slayer, like Husker Du, Suicidal Tendencies. Not hilarious, but crazy.
Yeah.
And that was the start of it, you know?
Cool. So when were you, how old were you when you started playing?
I started playing guitar at 12.
Okay.
And I started, like as we were saying earlier, around 14, we started just playing like at house parties and stuff like that. Covers, Def Leppard, stuff like that. Played some Motorhead. Judas Priest. I think there was a Duran Duran one in the set.
Awesome.
We were 14, you know, I was like, what do the girls want to hear? You know, her name is Rio. I was like, that's rock enough. We can pull that one off.
Oh, that bass line killer too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all fun times. And so, yeah, started once, very quickly went from local bands, played a high school talent show with this band Crypt, played Motley Crue and some original stuff. And then through meeting Sacrifice, the members of Sacrifice, the day Metallica played in Toronto for the first time in January 85 at the concert hall, Masonic Temple. I met those guys at the Record Peddler, where I'd been going for years. And it was just the meeting spot. It's where all the best records were. They'd be cranking Metallica. Hype for the show was huge. And so everybody went down there to kind of meet up. I met those guys. Oh, we got a band, Sacrifice. Yeah, sweet. Yeah, we're about to play our first gig, Slayer covers. Oh, wicked, you know. I said, I'm looking for a band. And they said, hey, you should join Slaughter. So I actually joined Slaughter for 3 jams.
The original Slaughter.
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
Yes, not the poser Slaughter.
Yeah.
Toronto's own death metal Slaughter. I won't say I was in the band, but I jammed with those guys 3 times out at their place. My recollection, they had tiny amps, like 10, 15 watt trainers, and I had like a 50 watt trainer.
You're in.
They were like, Dave, would you show us Seek and Destroy? And I tried, and they couldn't get it. It was way above the, whatever. We weren't there. And so, yeah, whatever, we just kind of parted ways. Became stayed friends and stuff, and saw them every time they played. And then started Death Militia with a high school buddy. Kind of more thrash and Motorheady and Metallica. Very raw. I listen to the early stuff from 85 now, very raw. I could see influence on black metal and stuff like that, just because our shit was recorded on Ghetto Blaster. Just shit. In the basement, classic.
Radio Shack tape player?
Yeah, boombox. Yeah, in our singer Evan Wilson's basement. And it's by 85, man, the shows were just nuts. Everybody rolled through. The shows were getting bigger. Amazing. My favorite one, Exodus at Larry's. Amazing.
They're such a great band.
Yeah, Bonded by Blood's my favorite thrash record. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Total perfection.
So we were just talking about the Toronto music scene in the early days and Sacrifice, and I want to actually stop and talk about Sacrifice for a quick second.
Sure.
It's been really interesting because as I've had more interviews, obviously I listened to Sacrifice, loved Sacrifice when I was a teenager. I knew as I was getting older that they were definitely in the top 5 Canadian metal bands from that era.
Uh-huh.
I had no idea how central they were to everybody.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, like I said, our paths crossed initially in January 85, and at that time, they were waiting to do their first show. I think it was booked. They hadn't played it. They had a different drummer, not Gus, and they had a singer. So Rob wasn't singing. He was just on rhythm guitar. And that was their first show a few months down the line. I don't think I was at that one, but I knew those guys. They were from Scarborough. I'm from Willowdale. A little closer to the subway line. We hung out, not all the time, but Joe and Rob used to come deliver pizzas with me.
Nice.
Out in Willowdale. It was great. And drive around in the car, and we just bullshit and listen to tunes and crack jokes and eat pizza and drink pops in the car. Along with Slaughter, they started getting the best shows. They opened for Slayer, they opened for Exodus, they opened for a whole bunch of bands. You can take a look at their their gig list, I'm sure, somewhere. So yeah, tons of bands. And they were the first ones that had an opportunity to record a demo. Razor, of course, not from Toronto specifically, so they were kind of ahead of the game, but totally independent. Brian Taylor took Sacrifice into the studio, did the Exorcism demo with them, sold that at the record peddler, everybody had a copy, and then did the album with them. The second album, is that For Determination? That one, they had the video for Pyrokinesis.
Yeah.
And that's it, man. National.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
And they toured.
I had a chat with Mike Sanders, who used to be in Dioxin from London.
Oh, yeah.
I had a chat with Dave Carlo from Razor. Both those guys were just like Sacrifice. You're like,
are you going to Exciter
Sacrifice and Razor next spring? Yes, I am.
Yeah, I think I'm going to roll to that one too. So.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your transition from metal into less metal.
Beyond. That, by the late 80s, there'd been so many people go through the ranks of Death Militia. That's the one thing Sacrifice had going. Once they had their lineup settled, they were able to keep it rolling for a good few years. And I think they got 3 albums out of that lineup with Rob singing. Yeah. And, and they toured. Whereas Death Militia, we were constantly tripping over ourselves, looking to replace a guy who just left, for the umpteenth time. So it just kind of petered itself out, and I found myself being the last guy standing after however many people were in that band, like Spinal Tap caliber. And so it was late 80s. I was listening to stuff like Jane's Addiction too, and also stuff like REM, and and also all the new stuff coming out. There's a lot of great music, and I just moved on, I guess. I don't know what I was looking to do. I answered Terry's ad in Now magazine. Buzzsaw blues band looks for guitar player. Needs guitar player and bass player, I guess. So they got me on guitar, had a great jam with Terry and the original drummer Joe, and just kept that one rolling for a few years too. We never quite got to where we wanted to go. Again, we had lineup troubles, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You
made a big hit though. Like you guys had a pretty big impact on the Toronto scene and beyond.
I think, when you look back, we definitely did a lot of firsts. We played with a lot of amazing bands and those amazing times. Like we played with Soundgarden, we played with Henry Rollins, played with Faith No More, played with Rage Against the Machine, played with Lydia Lunch. That was awesome. I was stoked on that one. Yeah, we opened for Lydia Lunch, played a lot of gigs. I got to give credit to Ian Blurton, who helped us out a lot at the beginning, and gave Terry, who knew him better than I did at the time, all these contacts of people to contact.
Yeah.
And we did just that, We ended up going down to New York City for the New Music Seminar on 2 occasions, 90 and 91. Very early. There wasn't a lot of other bands. Bare Naked Ladies was the other band.
Yeah.
And they were just getting started. And of course, those guys.
No one's heard of them.
Yeah. They, went at the Where Are They Now file, I guess. But, we went to go see Fishbone. There you go. It pops up again.
Yeah.
We saw them at the Palladium together. Got dropped on my head.
Oh.
From crowd surfing. Yeah, ouch. If I wasn't so many beers in at that point, I would have been done.
Do you remember the concert hall, of course, the old Masonic Temple in Toronto?
Yeah, for sure. That's where Sam Metallica played and all kinds of great metal shows.
I dove off the top speakers.
Oh, nice.
So climbed onto the speakers from the balcony and dove down.
Yeah.
I am still surprised I'm not dead.
Yeah, and walking. Yeah, you're walking.
It was that's what, 20 feet?
That's
I
a
just
high one.
Laid out and let her go.
I saw Jello Biafra do that.
Yeah.
I saw Eddie Vedder do that.
Yeah, but they were people everybody was watching.
Yeah.
I was just some drunk guy on the speaker at a Slayer show.
My experience at the Palladium at this Fishbone show was once I was on top of the crowd, and then just like that, I was on the ground.
Oh, man.
Bang.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, pretty bad.
So you had a few years with Sing Along with Tonto, with our brother Terry, and put an end to Tonto. You were going somewhere and you decided to call it a day.
Again, that ugly beast of lineup changes comes into play. We had so many rhythm sections. You'd be firing on all cylinders, and then somebody would leave, or there'd be personal beef, or whatever. And we parted ways with our bass player, Brent Losey, Cookie.
Yeah.
You should interview him too. He's on the Sunshine Coast.
Is he?
He is.
Nice.
Yeah. Look him up at the Cro-Mag spot there. He's big into mountain biking. He'd be happy to talk, I'm sure. But we parted ways with him. That kind of ended the whole sort of, for better or worse, Chili Peppers comparison era thing. Yeah, the party band thing. And we were getting more serious. The material was getting a little heavier and stuff. And that's the direction we wanted to go. Brent wasn't interested in that. So we got a replacement bass player, and with Steve Edgar on drums. We'd lost our drummer, who was Brent's, childhood buddy. These guys played together for years. It was dynamite. So we went on a cross-Canada tour, came out to Vancouver, and on that tour, we very quickly stopped talking to the bass player, and he to us. It just, wasn't meant to be, but we made the best of it. And when we got back, then Steve Edgar left, our drummer. And so that left Terry and I. What are we going to do? Well, we noticed the gigs weren't as good as we'd been used to. The arc seemed to be sort of dipping the other way.
Yeah.
And at that time, we had done a demo also in that lineup. We did a 1-song demo, or maybe 2 songs, with Jamie Stewart from The Cult.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he did, I think it was 1 song.
Yeah.
He did Pour Out with us, which started as a Tonto song. And Brent didn't play on that. Greg played on that. And then the lineup changed, and we used that as the first Substack. Demo, basically, even though other guys were on it. And we kind of built it from there. So that's how that transition happened. I guess maybe, the luster of the sort of party band thing fell off when the parties weren't as good.
Yeah.
And just focusing on better music. I remember getting a Les Paul around then, too. That changed everything. So it's like, okay, just a little fatter, beefier sound than the Strat. And Substack was wild. That was a totally wild band. It, if we would have stayed together, I think it, would have been a band that people would be paying attention to, because it was super creative. A lot like what I think I do now, like with Moths and Locusts stuff and Anunnaki type stuff, has its origin back then. That's when we started getting into improv and all that, which is the next level for me,
That's sort of like, so you do a little bit of, when you say improv, you're talking about that early Deep Purple, like stand on stage for 3 hours jamming kind of thing, or more?
No, more adding like soundtrack. We did a lot of that stuff in Tonto. We could stretch songs and, rip solos and boogie and breakdowns and get people on stage and stuff like that. That became pretty easy to do, fun. Yeah. And we also, at the same time as Substack, had a thing called the Stoney Curtis Trio, Gord and I, and a bunch of other guys. And that was all just made up on the spot. Whoever was there. And it was, it wasn't like noodly jamming. It was like as if you're composing a soundtrack on the fly, sort of.
Okay.
And doing soundscapes and taking it into different levels and a lot of dynamics. And so that kind of came into play too. And we started doing things in addition to songs that were just kind of, I don't want to say free form because they have form, but
they follow their own path.
Yeah,
to a
not
degree.
like a Richie Blackmore. Like nobody was that good. So Gord maybe, but
So you guys lasted a couple years as Substack.
Yeah, I guess probably from 93 to 95.
Right. And somewhere in there, you met Val.
Valentina and I met in June of 94. So she came out to some Substack shows and was involved in the crew and stuff like that. She, had been accepted to acting school in New York. So she went down there in September 94. And I went down a bunch of times and visited her over the school year. And she came back and stuff. And, obviously made a connection and decided to stick with each other, fell in love, the whole thing. So when Substack broke up, I was like,
Where's
I got
my
nothing to
suitcase?
lose. Like, really,
Yeah.
Saved up a bunch of dough, sold some collectible toys and stuff like that. And figured, worst case scenario, I got like 3 months down there,
Nice.
where I can pay some rent and live and whatever. So why not? and it lasted 10 years.
So I know my version of your story, or what I perceive.
See if yours is better than mine.
So you go down to New York. You go down to New York, following Val.
Yes.
While you're down there, your sort of younger year obsession with vinyl continues, and there's got to be an in-between step, but somewhere along the line, you turn yourself into the vinyl guru.
Well, at some point, not at some point, very early on, I started, making my living, in some aspect of the music business. Like, you probably knew me when I worked at HMV with Terry.
Yeah.
I worked at some, distributors outside of Toronto before that, record store stuff, did radio, just always involved in music to some degree. So I left HMV when I moved to New York, and it took another step forward. I had an interest in electronic music, but I ended up working for some people who made a movie on electronic music. And through that, we all started a label too. So kind of got into manufacturing and licensing and distribution and all this, all this totally amazing shit, selling records.
Yeah.
Who's actually buying like 30 copies of this record or 80 copies or 120 copies or whatever. And so, through that experience, just really got even deeper in the business of things. Vinyl was always around. I was always buying cool records when you could find them. Not everything in the 90s was released on vinyl. Certainly in the late 90s. So a lot of records or classic titles are hard to find in original pressings. But it never went away. Eventually, I started working at an actual pressing plant and managing the plant and just kind of getting a real feel for what can and can't be done and what's involved, the pros and the cons, the good and the bad. And I was playing some electronic shit back then too.
So from a bird's eye view, it's just, it sort of looks like what a crazy thing to do in the 90s is get involved in the music industry in vinyl.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Like in hindsight, when everybody was saying vinyl's dead,
Yeah.
here, buy your CDs.
Yeah.
And then it became buy your digital.
What saved it? In those days, electronic music and hip hop were making a lot of records. That's what I was sort of involved in. And I knew a lot of people doing it. So when I worked at the plant, I was able to tap into these producers and help them make the records. So I've been doing it ever since. Vinyl, it's crazy now. It's back.
Yeah, it's unbelievable now, and you can't really tell the quality of a lot of vinyl, right? Because some of those reissues, they're just taking old master tapes that were mastered for CD and pushing it out on vinyl, and then you put on the needle, and you're like, what is this garbage?
Well, I find the bigger labels are definitely flooding the market with a lot of stuff at high margin. I don't know. Personally, as a record collector, also, I would rather have like an original Velvets record than like go buy the new one. I'm sure they sound okay, but to me, I don't know. I'd rather pay $40 for an original one than $40 for a brand new one. Is my philosophy.
I paid $4 for Judas Priest's "Sin After Sin," and it has one scratch on it. Somewhere in the middle of a song, it just goes boom.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll take it.
Take it, yeah. I've got a nice Japanese "Sin After Sin," super nice, Adobe
nice.
and everything. Yeah. Mint.
You didn't pay $4 for it.
I didn't pay $4 for it though, no. But it's pretty good.
So you're in New York. You and Val are together. You're getting involved deeper and deeper in records. When did you decide to set up your own shop and just be the vinyl guru?
Around after 10 years of living down there, 2005, a couple years earlier, we were starting to, our son was born. He was born in 2002. That changes your whole thing. Like, suddenly you're not number one. You're not number two. The pets are ahead of you, man. Like, you're getting back in the line. And so, just thinking, like, do we want to live here? How can we start a business? It's very expensive. Health insurance alone down there is crazy. I was like, it's no way. It's not feasible. And we felt we had to move out of our apartment for space, for size consideration, having a growing kid. It wasn't big enough. He didn't have his own room. Once he got to be old enough, he wouldn't have had his own room. So we just kind of started casting stones a little further and further and further away to get out of the city, and then to get out of the States eventually, and get back to Canada. And then, we got some family out on the island and whatever. And the weather's great, and we love it here. And that's how we ended up out here.
Is that how you chose the island? Is what based on where your family was?
Yeah, more or less. And also, going to Vancouver, for example, that would have been a lateral move.
It's stupid expensive there.
And we were there.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of it.
Yeah.
That's what we were trying to get out of. So we wanted to go somewhere where we could just kind of have a little more room to breathe. And ended up in Nanaimo of all places. Got some family there. My birth mother lives there. That's how we knew Nanaimo. And my parents had moved to Victoria to retire.
Okay.
So, my mom's still around, but my dad was around then too. And so we were able to move out and help with them, and their needs getting older and raise a kid and stuff, kind of that like when you're in your 40s kind of thing, which I'm past now. So.
It's not that far ago,
Yeah. Still, it's good. You're out of it,
So you made the choice. You made the choice to start a business, move to Nanaimo, raise your son.
Yeah.
And of course, your music's bred in the bone for you. So you immediately start jamming with folks. Now,
not immediately. It took maybe a couple of years of living out there. We hit the ground running.
Well, that's sort of where that perspective of mine comes from.
We didn't know anybody.
That you sort of you hit the ground running, and it's like.
But not with music. Only with like work, getting our business going, getting our son going, getting our life going, meeting people, socializing. We did a lot of that.
Yeah, maybe it's just the connection that you and I have, but it felt to me like just your presence and getting involved, because you're an involved couple of folks. Right, you're involved in your community. It felt to me like the music scene in Nanaimo just suddenly got a little bit bigger, and it felt to me like the music scene on the island just got a little bit bigger.
Well, it's nice to hear.
Like from my perspective, it seems like every time there's a good show in town, Dave Reed's name is somewhere involved in it. And
even if it's only on the guest list here.
Whatever it takes, Dave.
Yeah, just can't not do it. And it's not just us. I mean, there's some other people really driving things down in Nanaimo for sure, and in Victoria, and up here in Courtenay.
Yeah.
And in Tofino, we've been making connections with people out there. Quadra. I mean, it's amazing. There's so many wicked places to play. Mm-hmm. Now that Moths and Locusts is 6 people, it's harder to go further.
Yeah.
Anunnaki just did a tour. That was a lot easier. 2 guys driving around in a rental car with a bit of gear. It's a lot easier than 6.
So let's talk a little bit about the now. Okay, so you're living in Nanaimo. Mm-hmm. You've got the Vinyl Guru, and then a couple years ago you start up Black Dot Records.
Yeah, Black Dot Records is pretty new. That's this year. Black Dot, the store,
right?
Probably 5 years now. Yeah, it's been going for a while.
Pretty select store.
Yeah, what the Black Dot is really just like a glorified storage locker for 2 guys' records that they have for sale for record shows that happen to be extremely good records.
Yeah,
and extremely well curated collection of records. It's not a storage locker. It's got, racks and stuff. It's very small. It's in the White Room, which is the performance space that we also run with Jack Thielman, our partner in the White Room, in the Black Dot, and Chris Thompson, another Nanaimo guy. Yeah, it's not open very often. You got a better chance of seeing us at the record shows.
Yeah.
But we do open. We're going to do a Halloween thing, and we have events at the space, and we'll open up and stuff.
I've only been there once.
It's a great store.
I would have been there twice, but it turns out I had the wrong cell number for you.
Where is this guy? Yeah.
I was like,
I heard you were crying to
Terry.
Where
Terry,
not talking to me anymore.
I've texted the guy like 27 times in the last 2 years, and I've got one response. Why is that? He's like, I don't know. He wants to talk to you.
What number do you got? The obvious question.
And then I was like, what number do you have, Terry? And he tells me, and I'm like, that explains the whole thing. Hey, Dave. Oh, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, boom. It's that easy.
Only took me 2 years to figure out.
It's that easy. Yeah, just get the right number.
So tell me now about Moths and Locusts.
Moths and Locusts.
So you switched to bass.
I did. That was always my preferred instrument of choice. As a kid, when I got into playing at 12, I wanted to be a bass player. I loved McCartney. I loved Lemmy, Entwistle, like all the coolest guys. Chris Squire, Geddy Lee, all the coolest guys were the bass players. And they were never the guys. There's plenty of bass players lurking in the background, but there's plenty of guys like kind of owning the instrument. Geezer Butler, amazing players. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that heavy sound. You know, I wanted to feel it.
Yeah.
And so my dad took me down to Long McQuaid, and he said, my dad, he didn't know anything about music, and certainly not rock and roll. He was born in 27. So he was like, I don't know. He wants to learn how to play bass. So the salesman sizes me up, and he says, well, let's put a bass in his arms and see how he does. So they put this bass on me, and the salesman says, try to touch the first fret. So I stretch. Like, I'm a small guy now, a little kid then. Like, I'm stretching as far as I can, like, oh my God. Like, you know.
You needed an SG
Yeah,
bass.
the guy said, well, little did I know. The guy said, maybe start him on guitar to my dad. So I left empty-handed. I didn't even get a guitar that day. My dad drummed up a Saturn from my cousin. My aunt gave him the Saturn. And so that's how that started. And I just kind of continued with guitar, and that's what I took lessons on and stuff, and played a little bass along the way. But I ended up getting a bass in trade from a buddy of mine back east. Yeah, he gave me a Fender Jazz, a Squire Jazz bass, like not a fancy one, and a bass pod. Sure, I'll take that.
Nice.
And so I started playing, and then another guy I knew in Nanaimo, he's actually in Parksville, Angus Barter from Moths and Locusts. He's one of the guitar players. His brother had a bass amp and a drum kit, and he was moving, and he said, you got a place to store this? Sure. So we cleared a bunch of shit out of this room, put the drum kit in there, the bass amp. I had a guitar amp and my Les Paul. And we started jamming. And then I think the gear left, so I got a bass amp and a drum kit. And then we got some more amps in there and some other players coming in there and some more shit and more shit. And Angus stuck around. Dave Bean, I met him. You know, how you meet when you're starting a band when you're in your like late 30s, early 40s. You meet them at like children's birthday parties and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you meet these guys. Hey, I remember you from last year, man. Yeah. We should jam. I know. We should. So that went on for a couple of years. And then finally we got together and like, oh, amazing. I got a guitar player. I got Angus down. It just kind of started as, you know, really some dads and guys blowing off some steam Friday nights, drinking some beers and smoking some joints and having some laughs and just ripping. And then we started writing some stuff, and then it kind of whittled down to a certain crew, and, you know, any lineup changes out of the way, and we had this lineup of 4 guys that we've been playing together for 10 years. And we've added Valentina and Samantha in the group now. They've been in it for 2 years. And Val's, you know, since even longer than that, she's been involved doing cover art and live stuff and all kinds of stuff. So the older Nico gets, the easier it is for us to do that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, those the jams turned into that band, and then turned into this crazy one, the Cymatics Research Institute. We've had 17 people playing at the same time. Totally insane.
Jesus.
I had to sort of pull the plug on that one. It was too unwieldy, at least temporarily.
Am I offline in your view if I say that Moths and Locusts has a real Hawkwind vibe to it?
There's that, but there's plenty of other stuff too.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely other stuff.
Yeah.
But if I had to draw like an immediate, what are they like? That's that's my go-to.
I would accept that if that's the reference point for somebody, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, not aping Hawkwind or anything like that, but you know, if we are, we're aping like Pink Floyd more or whatever, and
Pink Wind.
Yeah, Pink Wind. That's the Pink Fairies, though.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that brings us to Twink. He was involved in all that stuff.
Well, let's get to that.
Yeah. So Moths and Locusts. So 10 years, 3 albums. We did a double live record with Damo Suzuki from Cannes. We played with him twice. Yeah, played a lot of great shows. Played with Mudhoney. Just involved in bringing a lot of shows out here.
You did a tour, a bit of a tour, not
We've done a couple tours,
right?
We've gone a Western Ontario tour a couple times, and Ontario once, probably going back there at some point. We're realists. Yeah. Realists. We know it's not as easy as there's not the dough involved. Certainly like there was in the old days.
Yeah, it's more like taking a vacation
Sing On
and
with
everything
Tonto?
comes out of your pocket, right?
Yeah, Sing On with Tonto was crazy. They were making so much money at the bar they could give the bands 48 beers for free. It's like, no wonder I turned alcoholic for 30 years.
I got a couple of those.
Yeah, everybody did. You couldn't finish them.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So you've got Moths and Locusts.
Mm-hmm.
You've got
Anunnaki, yeah.
Anunnaki, sorry. You've got Black Dot Record Store,
And
which
the
is not
record
really a
label.
store, and a record label.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, in addition to that, we've got the White Room,
Yeah.
which hosts a lot of like all the good underground shows. Not all, there's other places, but it occupies a certain spot. You know, we're the art space. We're not the bar, where there's no like, you know, not a lot of talking over the performances. There's a lot of listening. It's an amazing room. It's a small place. We can pack at most. I don't want to say, but you know, it's a moderate amount of people. And there's a lot of intimate shows. And we're just, you know, I don't know, we're proud to be able to present that stuff. And it's not booze based. You know, we pay our rent in the Black Dot, we charge money at the shows, and that's what kind of keeps it rolling month to month. Yeah, what else do we got? We got all kinds of stuff. We got the label, Noise, Agony, Mayhem. That's a reference to Death Militia. I had that on a Death Militia poster from '85, just scribbled on the bottom, Noise, Agony, Mayhem, and we had this song, Noise, Agony, Mayhem, one of the earliest ones. Like super thrash, just ridiculous.
So let me ask you a question. When I talked to Terry Moore, he mentioned that you've got all the old tapes, all the old Substack and Tonto tapes.
I've got the
any
demos.
plans to put that onto vinyl?
Not right now. Working on a Death Militia project or two now.
Nice.
So that's where that's at. We're working on some stuff for the like 1987, 88 stuff, the more power metal stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Totally different band than the first band.
Yeah.
I'm the only constant member. There's plans to get that going. That's what spearheaded the label whenever that was, 2006, 2007.
Okay.
Put out a Death Militia 45, Noise, Agony, Mayhem #1.
Did you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I'm sure I got one for you. I don't have many left, but I got one for you for sure.
I want.
So yeah, 2 tracks from '85. We did a CD anthology. Yeah, 2006, 2007. Put out the Death Militia anthology CD, and there was one song that didn't make the cut because it would have made the disc too long. So perfect B-side. So I saw a photograph of Death Militia live at the DMZ in '85. I was like, fuck me, that looks like the Ramones. Like, it's so amazing. That's the photo Chris was talking about. And it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I was so detached from it. I was like, I know that's me, but look at this band. It's crazy. And so it kind of made me revisit all that stuff. Put the 45 out, had the extra track. And so I made a bunch of those. And that kind of started the whole label. That was the first one. I had no plans for anything else. And then we did a local Nanaimo, like, insane 2 punk women, like the Bash Brothers, just totally bananas 5-song EP. And then we did a Come On 45 with Ian Blurton, City of Daggers. Then we did the first Moths and Locusts 45.
Nice.
That would have been 2011. Just finished the 8th anniversary of that. Put out a lot of Nanaimo bands in addition to Moths and Locusts and my related stuff. We did that double live one with Damo. Yeah, a lot of wild records.
Crazy.
We did a record even featuring Ornette Coleman through
Serious?
some friends that I know.
Holy
yeah.
shit.
It's pretty underground.
Not metal, but awesome.
But awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was a pressing of 300 copies. Like, it's totally ridiculous. And then eventually we got connected with Twink from the Pink Fairies and the Pretty Things and Tomorrow and, associated, played with Sid Barrett's band Stars, his last band. I mean, legendary figure. I was a fan of his album Think Pink, 1970, and all those other bands. And through a mutual friend, we got connected with him to reissue that in mono on
Nice.
Noise, Agony, Mayhem.
Oh, man.
Which is dynamite. So we did 3 pressings of that. They all sold out. And then talk came to, let's have Moths and Locusts play with Twink and make a record. I don't know who suggested it, but I was like, I was in. Like, sure. So it's totally insane. He lives in Morocco now. He's a Muslim guy living in Morocco. He comes to Nanaimo. We meet him in Vancouver at the record show on Sunday, and then Monday we're in the studio in Nanaimo for 4 days. Total insanity making this record with him. Jay Ferguson and Gregory McDonald from Sloan was in town.
Yeah.
So they came down and got in on the action. Arlen from Wolf Parade and Anunnaki also was in on it. Ian Blurton was in on the whole session. He flew out
Really?
to finish something in Victoria, and then he came up for the whole session.
That's crazy.
Incredible. And we made the record Think Pink, which came out earlier this year. And that's like the highest profile thing that we've done. It definitely helped get the Moths and Locusts band name out there as you know, being a good band and, you know, versatile and doing stuff. Like, it doesn't sound like Hawkwind. If you listen to it, it definitely, the music is Moths and Locusts music. Some may sound like that. Some may sound Pink Floyd-y. Some may sound Beatle-y. Some may sound like, I don't know, Droney, Terry Riley stuff. Like, we're into all kinds of different
reminiscent, really, of the other stuff, right?
But fresh, you know.
Yeah. But it's sort of like when I used to draw the comparison from Mr. Bungle to Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
It was a tenuous link.
Yeah.
But it was there for me,
sure.
right? So
yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's pretty close, actually.
Yeah.
Just interesting music that's not easily played.
Unless you have written it.
It will require sheet music or a strong understanding of the style in which it is performed.
Cues, many cues.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're here in Courtney at the Avalanche to actually see Sloan tonight.
Yeah.
So they're in town. So that's pretty awesome. And did you have anything to do with the show, or is it just luck?
No, just here to see some friends play.
Cool. That's super. So just share your social media stuff with us.
My social media stuff. Let's see, what do we have? We have Moths and Locusts on Facebook. We have Anunnaki on Facebook. We have Vinyl Record Guru on Facebook. We have Noise Agony Mayhem on Facebook. We have The Black Dot on Facebook. And The White Room on Facebook. That's a lot of Facebook to take care of. Some of those also on Instagram.
I'm more of an Instagram guy. I got off Facebook a couple years ago. I do not miss it.
It's good for promoting shows. That's why I'm still on.
Yeah, that's what Val was telling me a few days ago.
This is Dave from Moths and Locusts, and you're listening to the Hard Reuben Radio Insanity right here, right now.
Thanks, man.